They're on a mission! They're on a mission! Yeah, I am really happy to finally have specifically a Hasbro Mable. He's like one of my favorites. He's one of my boys. I know he's not a good wrestler. I know that in the grand scheme of things, he's, let's say a little underwhelming. Or maybe overwhelming, depending on who you are and if you're the Undertaker's orbital bone. But I love this guy, and I can't wait to talk about him. From Hasttel Toys, this is Nelson Frazier and I think it's Bobby Horne. Really, it's Mable and Mo. It's the Men on a Mission from the new generation. I know a lot of people look back on Men on a Mission and they scoff, and yeah, kind of rightfully so, but I really love the Men on the Mission because they're so dog shit. It's like Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock, but even worse, in that it's just like what old white people thought rap music was. It didn't help that Oscar, who, by the way, I do have on pre-order, but he's not here yet. I'll review him when I get him. Was, not the best rapper. He had such bars as, his name is Mo, his name's not Joe, or, look at my man, he's ready, willing, and able. What's his name? His name is Mable. It's, it's rough. It is very rough. Speaking of rough, these figures had a bit of an unfortunate issue. So Hasstel sent an email out earlier this week where they basically said, hey, our figures just got here from China, but the bubbles, like as soon as they come out, the bubbles are falling off. So they basically sent an email and was like, hey, we're not going to send these to anyone. However, if you are a loose collector and would like to go ahead and get the figures, send us an email and we'll go ahead and send them on, but otherwise we're just going to hold all these loose figures as reserve stock, just in case. So, I saw that, and I figured, I'm a loose collector, I don't want to necessarily wait, and I definitely don't want to take a boxed figure from someone who would rather have a boxed figure, so I said, yeah, I'll take some loose figures. So now I get to do an early review, and it's great because I always feel kind of bad about opening these figures because I think the boxes always look really nice. Don't have to worry about that now, though, because it's been done for me. Taking a look at the boxes, though, you can see that they're doing the style of the orange-carded Hasbros. I do like the portrait of Nelson Frazier. I want to just call him Mable, I'm sorry. And then on the back, another really good depiction of King Mable. Unfortunately, of course, this isn't King Mable, and that's definitely not the attire he wears. It is nice as they have the in memory to Nelson Frazier Jr. down here. And I really like how they put their design documents on the back. I think that's really cool. You can also see that in this upcoming wave, you have, of course, Men on a Mission, and also the Godwins. I don't care about them, so I'm definitely not buying. I'm not buying White Supremacists, I'm sorry. Then, of course, you have Bobby Horne, and Mo looks very nice. You can see same deal on the back. No picture for Mo, weirdly enough. I guess I don't want to be a cynic, right? Because I think both these guys, they have a place in wrestling history. That said, I think there's a reason why Mo still goes by Sir Mo on the Independents all these years later. Mable might have been the star between the two of them. Just taking a look at these two, and I keep saying it, but I love just how these two look. Hasttel Toys, they've gone a very unique direction compared to a lot of the other people doing retro figures nowadays, whereas Mattel and Cello will try to do a more modern take. And then you have some I said Cello before, what I meant to say was Zombie Sailor. Cello Toys tries to do a little bit more of a how you think they would look. These guys actually do just look and feel a lot like Hasbro's. They're not quite as shiny, but the art style is very much there. And looking at them, I adore how they captured, especially Mable. There are some unsightly things, like you can see the seam line here, and the paint. Even though it's not bad, the yellow is slightly mismatched, which is unfortunate, and you have mismatched for the strands just from where the two halves of the body come together. I also have this very weird gap between the torso and shoulder here. I'm going to assume that's just a production error. That said, you'd see that in Hasbro's too. It's just a reality of how these figures are made. Looking at Mo actually has a little bit more going on in terms of paint because you have the black in the eyebrows and the black on his mohawk. Unfortunately, you can also see there's just the tiniest bit of overspray right here on his button. So he looks like he has a diseased nipple up there. But the yellow actually matches a lot better on him than it did on Mable. I'm just going to assume that it's because it's easier to apply yellow to this body than it was to put over the purple. Or actually, looking at it, I think his skin is painted on this torso as opposed to the strands. So overall, I think these two came out really well. And of course, they don't have gimmicks, but you can raise up the arms. You have waist articulation and a head rotation on Mable. You have the same exact stuff on Mo. So if you're someone who really just needs the action gimmicks, I get it. Trust me, I like it when they put the gimmicks in too. That said, I don't think you necessarily need them, because I'm more interested in just having these guys in this aesthetic. Speaking of, Mable and Mo, as goofy as they are a representative of the new generation. And I think that's a huge reason as to why people would want these figures, because they kind of complete a massive corner of that era, for good and for ill. So what I want to do now is just compare and contrast some other companies and their wrestlers from that same era, see how they fit in. The obvious place to start is to compare them to proper Hasbros. You can see I've pulled in The Undertaker, Yokozuna, and Giant Gonzalez. Titans of the new generation era, once again, for better or for worse. And here's the thing. Again, they don't have the shininess of the Hasbros, but I would argue that they actually match the art style better. Let me say pull in a retro. Spoiler, because it's going to be a retro that we look at later. You can see Retro Taker from Mattel does not really capture the aesthetic as well, in terms of proportions, in terms of likeness, everything like that. Same thing with Cella. I think what Cella was going for was more like, what is your mind's eye of a Hasbro, as opposed to what did the Hasbros actually look like, so they're almost a little too cartoony. And then Zombie Sailor's whole thing is, what if the Hasbros were made today, so they're meant to be more realistic looking. So as a result, the Hasttel corner of retro figures, I think their big niche, the way that they're able to make theirs unique, is they've really honed in on that art style. And of course, there's also the fact that they seem to be really focusing on the new generation era, whereas other companies tend to be going for the 90s or the 80s, like the Attitude Era and ECW type wrestlers, and then also the Golden Age Hulkamania era wrestlers. Kind of focusing on this corner of wrestling that people have nostalgia for is a pretty smart move. I think I want to point out, and the reason I pulled these guys out, right? So Mable is slightly larger than Yokozuna, which is what you want. That would be correct. And also, he's still shorter than Giant Gonzalez. I know it sounds dumb, but whenever I get a big man figure, I always want to make sure that Giant Gonzalez is still taller, because that was one of the rules of the Hasbro line, was they couldn't have a figure taller than Giant Gonzalez. So I feel like that should be a rule that is kept in place. So, looking at these guys, I really appreciate the effort they put in to making them match with the normal Hasbros. But, let's say you maybe don't do the original Hasbros, maybe you just collect the newer versions. How do they match up with, say, the Mattel Retros? Look at some of the newest retros we have. I have The Undertaker and Vader, and of course Vader's a bit taller, Taker is definitely a lot more slim looking, and they scale really well with Mable and Mo. I think I do want to point out though, and I think this is great that we're getting these guys in kind of a similar time period. The whole reason Undertaker had to wear that mask for so long is because he had a shattered orbital bone. The reason he had a shattered orbital bone is because Mable accidentally hurt him in a match. So, it's really good synergy. That wasn't even meant to be synergy. I love it. Mattel was really the company that brought into vogue the idea of companies that weren't Mattel doing the retro figures. So, I do like that I can have Adam Page here as a counterbalance. And what I'll say is, I think in terms of the gleam, they're closer to the Hasbros, but I still think that they're just a bit too cartoony to actually match in with the Hasbros. Again, I'm going to pull in Taker, because Taker is just always a good figure to use for these types of discussions. You can see, Taker still has some depth to sculpt that Atom Bomb doesn't. However, Mable and Mo do have that depth of sculpt. So, that's the reason why I keep saying Hasttel has found the Occam's razor of what this art style is supposed to be. With Zombie Sailor, you can see they don't really mesh all that well. You can see a similar DNA, but they seem like very different parts of the family tree. But still, worth bringing up. Guys, Hasttel Toys blew me away when I first saw their Ahmed Johnson figure, and I'm still trying to track that one down because it looks just terrific. But as soon as I saw that they were doing Men on a Mission, one of my all-time favorite tag teams, for ironic reasons, I knew I had to jump on them, and I'm so happy I did. These figures, despite having a little bit of a production nightmare, do not get me wrong, I still think they are incredible. I enjoy them so much. I love how they look. I love how they feel. I love how they're going to take up an appropriate corner of the shelf now. My one complaint, not even my one complaint, but my one worry, is people are going to see that Hasttel Toys had that issue with the bubble, and they might think going forward, like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't get in on pre-orders. What I'll say is, I think Hasstel handled it the best way they possibly could. They sent that email out, they made it very clear no one's getting these bubbles, and then they asked you, the consumer, if you really care, do you want to go ahead and get the figures, do you want to keep them? I obviously went ahead and got them. So I would stick by, I think Hasstel did it in the best way they could, given the situation. At the same time, you don't want that situation to happen to you. I'm really worried that this is going to turn into people dogging on Hasstel the same way they dog on Rush, which, don't get me wrong, Rush deserves it. Their figures fall apart. But these guys aren't. These figures are good. They're solid. They feel great. They look amazing. I know I'm biased. I've made multiple videos of King Mable figures just talking about how much I love the big lug. But I want to really get this across. I think these are wonderful retro figures, and I think that they are going to be real testaments to what companies outside of Mattel can do with this aesthetic, with these people, with these likenesses. So with all that said, I wholeheartedly recommend these guys if you're able to get them. Due to the issues, unfortunately, I'm willing to bet that there's going to be a huge overstock of these guys, at least for a little bit. So keep your eyes open. Go to Hasttel Toys, check out eBay, see if you can get loose guys for cheap. Because I definitely think they're worth it, regardless of if you want them for your retros or if you want them for your Hasbros. I think they work either way.